We continue our series looking at the claims of the Jehovah's Witness publication, Revelation, its Grand Climax at Hand. Moving on to the subject of the seeds, we shall start with Chapter 2, Paragraph 9 and Paragraph 10. In Paragraph 9 of Chapter 2 of the Revelation book, they make the claim that not only God has an organization, but so too does Satan. When modern readers read Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, the entities described there can easily be imagined as being one organization, perhaps with a human part and a spiritual part. But the Bible never mentions the word organization. It also doesn't assign these entities specific roles in a modern corporate-style hierarchy. There is also a very real danger that comes from this kind of worldview. When you see God's side and Satan's side as literal competing organizations, every person, group, or idea may be judged as being in one or the other. Jehovah's Witnesses promote this idea, and they aren't the only religious group to see things this way. Even non-Christian groups sometimes view the forces of good and evil as organizations. This can foster suspicion, division, and spiritual elitism. We're in the organization of God, they're in the organization of Satan. Historically, this mindset has justified religious exclusion, persecution, and the silencing of dissent. We see this cross over into politics today in many places, recently in so-called Christian nations. If God's organization is equated with a specific denomination, leaders can claim divine authority for their own policies and teachings. In Jehovah's Witnesses, this is exactly what happens. Dissent from organizational teaching is framed as rebellion against God himself. Other groups with similar thinking have also used it to discourage critical thinking and enforce loyalty. Trivia time. Did you know there is an unusual translation of Mark chapter 3, verse 22 in the New World Translation? The New Greek English Interlinear New Testament has Beelzebul, but the NWT uses Beelzebub here. Originally, Baalzebul, Baal the prince, was a local manifestation of Baal, from Ekron. This deity is mocked in 2 Kings 1:2 by using the name Baalzebub, Lord of the Flies, instead. However, in the New Testament Greek, this reverts to Beelzebul to refer to the ruler of the demons that Jesus then apparently links to Satan. So, to translate this Mark verse with Beelzebub is a mistranslation and probably deliberate in order to bring it in line with the 2 Kings mockery. This gets confusing when Insight on the Scripture says Beelzebub is a designation applied to Satan, the prince or ruler of the demons, because the use of bub rather than bull clashes with the idea of Satan being a prince, and the bub variant is deliberately supposed to strip Baal of that title. Let's look at how a scholar might examine the idea of the seeds in Genesis. Scholars have to put devotional bias to one side when they read the Bible. There is no room for treating the Bible any differently from any other ancient text. They recognize that Bible scripture was not originally arranged into canons, and each book was separate. They recognize that there are different and sometimes contrasting voices in different books, and sometimes even within the same book. Therefore, they do not treat the scripture as divinely inspired. Jehovah's Witnesses map God, Satan, and their supposed organizations onto the serpent and the woman in Genesis 3:15. The seeds are entities that make up the organizations. But as this all starts with Genesis, does Genesis itself give any hint that this is so? Let's briefly look at Genesis 3 and the whole section where Yahweh curses the other characters in the story. Genesis 3:15 mentions the seeds, and that there will be an enmity between these two seeds. The fact that verses 15 and 16 both use the term the woman, one after the other, suggests that this is the same woman and not different women. They must both be Eve. Otherwise, the literary flow of the Genesis 3 text is broken. Genesis doesn't suggest that this war will be spiritual, that the seeds are metaphors for organizations, or that this has anything to do with God needing to prove his sovereignty. There are no clues in Genesis that we should be looking deeper to find out who or what the seeds are. All the internal evidence of Genesis itself points to these seeds being literal offspring of a literal serpent and a literal woman. Jehovah's Witnesses get to their conclusion partly because of a theological concept called progressive revelation. This is part of what we will examine when we discuss paragraphs 11 and 12. Don't forget to check the resources in the description.